All right, cool. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for giving me the chance to kick this off. I usually, as I mentioned, do talks about generative design when it comes to applied like communications design. I talk a lot, trying to onboard agencies and designers. But today I thought I'd mix it up a little bit because we actually want to celebrate processing's birthday, which really is, I think, an incredible milestone. 20 years in the field of computer and IT is something in itself. To live this long and to be relevant this long is something incredibly exciting and I think special. And I also really want to just celebrate the community that has grown, all the kind of stuff that Tim did, everything that has happened, coming out of this. And so I thought, instead of just going too much into detail about the creative strategies and all that work, I really wanted to tell a little bit the story of how processing, quite literally actually, changed my personal life. And though it's just one of, I guess, the probably tens of thousands of stories which are connected to processing, I hope it's one that is possibly a bit inspiring, and it's hopefully at least one that is cool to listen to. So I don't want to bore you with my whole life story, but I think it just helps to give a little context of how I actually discovered processing and how it all like really changed my life. And as you can see, even as a kid, I was quite interested in computers, and I guess like a lot of you have that kind of desire in you to kind of see what's possible with technology. I didn't for a long time really know what to do with it, but it was always just inspired by the possibilities of having a computer and being able to like tell it to do something that I wanted. And that I think is something that has stayed with me for all my life. And I coded a lot as a kid, just having fun and stuff. And at, I think it was 2011, I actually founded a company or helped found a company with a friend of mine. At that point, I think it were like 3 people. And for roughly 10 years, I was responsible for like really the entire branding and strategy and communications department, which initially basically meant being the only dude with Photoshop on a computer, because we really just were doing these super small projects, but with a lot of love and dedication, it really grew quite respectably, I guess, for a city like ours. And when I left, it were 40 people, and it was an incredible experience. And we did a fusion of branding, electronic commerce, and data analysis, basically to, let's be blunt, basically sell stuff on the internet in a cool way. And we were quite successful with that. And it was an interesting learning curve because I learned a lot about the value of creativity. I learned a lot about also how to get other people inspired and how to listen to people and kind of really find stories and narratives in even sometimes the most boring things where you wouldn't imagine them. And I guess really learning that whenever you really listen closely and look at something closely, it cannot be boring, but it's interesting. But boredom is a word that still became relevant during that time, because if you've done this job for 10 years, at some point, it kind of things repeat and they are not that exciting anymore. And I was kind of in a time of crisis, and I actually met this wonderful dude. Tim already mentioned it in 2014, basically being at a point in my life where, I was super successful with what I did, and it was growing, it was getting better, and, all the things you would actually ask for, but being the kind of creative personality I am, I was still not really feeling happy. And then actually when I met Tim and we started to talk about, he had just come back from his studies in Münster, where he, if I understand it correctly, at least wanted to initially write his bachelor's thesis on software called processing, because he had just recently discovered that in the library. And so he exposed me to this book, Generative Design, by Helmut Bonacker, Benedikt Groß, Julia Laub, all the wonderful people who are, involved in that community. And yeah, it quite literally blew my mind, just seeing what was possible at that intersection of design and code, and just these kind of visuals, which were totally different from everything I had created in the past, like 15 years using Photoshop and Illustrator and all that kind of stuff. And it was just incredibly exciting. Like for the first time in so long, I actually felt like my job was something that could be interesting again. And we were super lucky to kind of also be in a spot where Tim was making like live electronic music with like one track delay pedal, basically creating intricate, super cool electronic live music with that. And because they had seen that in Münster, which is again the city where he studied, he said, like, Patrik, there's these people who kind of do music and then they do like visuals in a somewhat cool way. And then we kind of started to talk about, what if we were to use processing and software and code to kind of like really do interactive live visuals and things where kind of the music influences everything. And we started playing like really cool venues and places and gigs. And for me, that was, I think, a defining point in my life, because if you start something new, there's always this chance that you don't continue doing it, because there's like a million other things which are interesting, but having this kind of environment where we were constantly talking about music and visuals, and where I could like bring it to the people in clubs, that was an incredible experience, because it kept me going. It kept me asking, what's possible, where can I do this? And it also opened up like an entirely new realm for me personally, because before being like initially a graphics designer and then creative director, most of the stuff I did, was happening in an office, and it was kind of like, I don't know, putting things on screens, people check it out on mobile phones, but it was never really about seeing or meeting the people who actually like consume or are being exposed to my work. And, this all changed it, because it was happening in clubs outside, people were dancing, drinking, having fun. And for me, that was something that really, really changed a lot the outlook on what is possible if you combine basically these fields of design and programming with something that's more related in the fields of experience. And just like a little example of what that looked like and what that sounded like is here a cool like live recording of Tim doing some cool stuff with his delay pedal. Didn't make it that long, but yeah, it was just magical for me at that time. I mean, I come from a small city called Paderborn. It's like realistically 70,000 people. We don't have such a thriving cultural scene, which had a lot of this stuff going on. And for me, it felt like with Tim and I, it felt like doing some kind of crazy pioneer work. I mean, later on, I realized obviously that a lot of people do awesome stuff in this field, but I also realized that living in a rather small town wasn't necessarily that bad, because it gave us a chance to just experiment and do a lot of stuff and find a lot of like open doors, because people also hadn't seen this yet. And to not be too discouraged initially just because you already see all these like awesome people doing stuff. So that was, it was incredibly fun and creative time. And what happened next, I think, was another really defining moment for both Tim and I, because at some point, Tim, I think he tells that story at least like that. He was so inspired himself by the visuals and all that stuff which was going on, that he didn't really want to do music anymore, but he also wanted to jump into this whole like processing, creative coding thing and do all of that. And he had this super cool idea, because with a friend of ours, Lucas, a year before, he had rented a cabin in the woods to prepare for a gig that they had. And he said, look, how about we rent that thing for a week, and all we do is basically try and see what we can do with processing, what we can do with creative coding, and just where that leads us. And it was a super interesting experience, which we've tried to recreate multiple times after that, because we really like got out from the city, from our usual space. There was like no internet, no mobile phone connection, no nothing, just this cabin in the woods, a couple of beers, us and laptops. And that was really awesome, because we just had the chance to look at a lot of work, to just have fun, to just play with it. And again, as Tim said, I think it's something that I would encourage everybody to really try and do if ever possible. Like, just detach yourself from all the other stuff and just try to experiment and see where it leads you. This was exactly the time also where we met, or where we found this Tumblr blog called FY Processing by Justin Lincoln. I don't know if he's listening or not, but that was something where for the first time, I think both of us saw this huge world of creative potential of generative design and what was possible. And what we did in that time, because also again, Tim was always trying to find systems and also restrictions. That's something I learned from him. Like, in a field where basically everything is possible, limitation is one of those key values which really help you to focus and to explore a vast amount of ideas without getting completely lost. And as we had just found this Tumblr blog, we also had discovered Tumblr, which we didn't know before, at least I didn't. And so what we did was we started like this kind of daily habit, or in the woods, where we were creating like GIF animations, which because also of the restrictions of Tumblr, we're basically always like 500 by 500 pixels square. We couldn't go beyond 2 megabytes, and it had to be an animated loop. So it had to perfectly loop because, again, we just could create these small files, which was an amazing like creative limitation. And I think I've never in my life created so much stuff in so little time, just because, it was just like the perfect storm of, discovering new possibilities and taking this forward. You can still check out all that old work, by the way. It's still available, but it was the start of something which I've never really given up on. Kind of using these limitations to come up with a large amount of ideas. And it started with these like super simple things. I didn't know a lot about processing, and I didn't know a lot about creative coding, generative design, whatever you want to call it. I did already know how to code in general. I had done that before, but it was like an interesting discovery journey of discovery, starting with these super simple things and then discovering just shapes, and also trying to have like different things happen on a timeline. I was using the Annie library at that point and exploring these kind of stuff to the right. Something that I was incredibly fascinated about at that time was this chance of infinite results and things which every time you let it run just looks totally different. And I don't know, I got more into just playing typography and stuff. My color choice was questionable at that time, I don't know, but really just getting more into, integrating vector files and, more complex animations, particles, and all that kind of stuff. And then I kind of discovered like the entire world of physics, animations, and, what was possible within that, and flocking simulations, this incredible book, The Nature of Code by Daniel Schiffman, which has influenced me, or had influenced me at that time quite a bit. And these were all things that was just incredibly exciting for me at that time, because before that, for 10 years, I had created designs really in a boardroom. Like you talk about stuff, and then you set it up, and then you create it, and then you ship it to the people, you get some feedback, and you update it, creating something which is basically living a certain life of its own, and which was constantly evolving and changing, which was at that time especially rather unpredictable of the outcome. Was just an entirely new world for me to really think about, what's possible in design and communication and art, obviously. And I don't know, I took it further. I started experimenting with faces and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know why I put this in here actually, but it was just this kind of journey of taking it from something really simplistic to asking like, where are the limits? What happens if you apply it to the faces of people? Again, what's something where it starts to become disturbing? You're also starting to ask questions again about identity and all such things. I think I created in the past 5 years more than 400 different animations with this kind of rather simplistic approach. If you're ever interested, check out my website, the idea section, where like all of that stuff can be completely accessed. I did a lot also like with Connect and body tracking, and actually it's just I get excited when I talk about it, because like wherever you look, really there's a new opportunity to do something cool, be it typographic work, graphics design work, more traditional stuff, again, everything involving bodies and sensors, whatever. So I'm rambling. Anyway, what happens already in that time in the woods was that Tim and I were taking like a lot of walks, and we really reflected upon what we were seeing. We asked ourselves, what is it that's happening? And we made for us, incredibly important discovery, which later on, you find out you're not the only one to find that approach. But for us, it was incredibly new and incredibly powerful. And because we realized that behind basically all of the amazing creative coding, generative design works, that we saw and that inspired us so much, there was actually a rather clear formula that was making those happen. And And it's so incredibly simple that it seems almost absurd, but the more you start to think about it, the more powerful it is as a creative strategy. And it's something that if you check my website, for example, I tag every project, every idea, everything I do, I basically always tag with this formula. And it goes just like this: input through a process generates an output. Again, that might seem rather obvious, and like, why is he so excited? Why is he talking about this stuff? But for us, again, it was something that was holding together like all of these projects. And it, I think, makes a bit more sense if you really put some context to it, because if you put like a lot of options on the side of the input, like music, sound, text, big data, whatever, and you connect it to an output, that is always the starting point for a story. It's always the starting point for an incredible journey. And it is a lot of times something that has possibly never been done before in this way, just because the combination of like programming, data, like algorithms in general, interaction, storytelling, design, everything that makes up this field of creative coding and digital art, I think is only now starting to emerge. So, I mean, there are incredible things where like big data is actually turned into physical sculptures. I mean, that's, I think, to me, still like a really cool way of thinking. Like, what happens if you take something digital and turn it into something physical? How does that change the perception of that data, of that story? What if people can touch something which before that was just digital? Like more traditional stuff, obviously, like a lot of projects that you see, like where you take like kind of newsfeed and turn it into a data visualization, or I don't know, you could take a text or a book and just turn that into a book cover. And this is more from my talk where I like onboard agencies, but I still found it interesting to maybe share it at this point. It's just, to go through the way of how this basically works for me. And it's just, if you think about it, if you have an input, which is a text, any book, if you look at it in detail, like simplistically speaking, there's like a lot of different elements in there which make up such a book, like adjectives, which you could like get from a natural language processing approach. You can tie that to, I don't know, some shapes or textural properties can be, tied to colors, characters, to images, etc. And what I've learned, interestingly, like an image that works for a lot of people to explain this process is that if you take all of these ingredients, right, and if you put them into this metaphorical blender here, something new can come out, but still, like, it's still all the ingredients. It hasn't necessarily changed, but they've just been remixed into something completely new, into a new form, into a new shape or experience. And in that case, any book could generate its own cover. And not to go into too much detail, like in this specific project, but I was really experimenting with, how can people and computers kind of collaborate in this creative approach in a very different way, right? Not just basically just spitting out random stuff, but I was, in this case, for example, experimenting with genetic algorithms. So basically what was happening is like the algorithm analyzes this entire text and this book, and from all the stuff you just saw, it makes a couple of predictions of what could be a cool book cover and ties the data in there. And then you, as a designer or whoever is using it, can actually assign certain scores. Like, I love the color work, the typography, I don't know, the image definitely not. And basically what is happening is that, then you press a button and it generates like a new breed of child book covers, basically, only with the best traits of what you just selected. And obviously, as in any good genetic approach, there's a certain kind of mutation and randomness in there, like coming up with new ideas. What I think is interesting about this is that it's not just a person telling the computer what to do, but it's also not just the computer spitting out random stuff. It's one of many approaches where basically the best of both worlds can come together. The incredible possibilities that a computer has of analyzing and calculating stuff, and then a human being kind of curating this approach with, the emotions and instincts that a computer can obviously never have. And Tim created this mind map quite a long while ago, and we had that when we still shared our office. We had that as a large printout on the wall, just to always remind us of, the huge amount of possibilities that are hidden within this basic input-output formula. And this is by no means comprehensive. Obviously, there's even more things that you could put on either side. But the joke always was that you could just take like two arrow dots and throw one to the left, one to the right, and come up with a new cool idea for a project. And has definitely held true for so many things, because only now am I always like continuously finding new things which are in this mind map, which were projects that I have just done. So I thought this is something I just really, again, wanted to share with you if you haven't heard it or if you haven't seen it, because what it really does for me is it has been a very helpful guide on this journey of discovering creative coding and seeing what to do with this, because you can get lost. There's a million possibilities, but kind of taking this input-output approach and then limiting yourself to certain things always gave me a path forward to find new and interesting stories and to push it forward, to not get lost. So that is definitely something which I think is super helpful. To me, the possibilities are infinite, and I was starting this entire talk with like how processing changed my life. And I think this discovery really changed it quite literally, because I just realized like whenever I get bored with a field, I can just do something else in this realm of creative coding, and it's always going to be interesting. So I totally see myself doing this, if I can, with 80 and still finding like fun stuff to do with this. Just a couple of things that I thought were interesting. I already mentioned that, but to me, I really feel like that in generative design, it's important to realize that our roles as designers or programmers change into someone who are more setting the rules and define the goals and curate the results. I think that's an interesting step forward in what this enables us to do, actually. And I really feel that this, at least if you let it, shines best if you allow yourself to co-create with the computer in a radically new and different way. If it's not just a tool executing blindly where you click, but if you give it a certain amount of autonomy to do stuff which is interesting. There's so much stuff I could talk about. I will not. I'll show you just one more example. But really, if you think about it, also like from the business perspective, from the creative perspective, there's like so much stuff that this changes. And if you just create like little animations, or if you take this to the next level agency world, it's incredibly interesting to see, what possibilities are hidden within this field. And Tim already mentioned it. Because we're, I think, both so passionate about it, and I think not so many people talk more about the underlying formulas and strategies and ideas. We started this podcast, so if you're really interested, we just try to make it non-technical and really just creative and something that everybody can listen to and hopefully be inspired by, and just also find their way into this wonderful world and just to have fun with it. So I do not know what the next slide is. It could be a video. Let's see. No, okay. So all of that was basically which led me to the point where I am at right now. And that was the next, hopefully not final chapter in my journey, which currently makes me very much concerned and interested in the field of like blending creative algorithms, generative design, creative coding, whatever you want to call it, with communications design, with applied graphics design, with using this for cultural institutions, for brands, for agencies, to like bring this into the world and look at it from a different perspective. This is kind of fusing my like old job as a creative director with my new capabilities of whatever the job description of that is. Creative technologist might be an interesting thing. And I think the next slide is a video of some of the stuff I do, and just some awesome music also by Tim. So I'm just going to play that and stop rambling for a second. Yeah, so it's been a crazy ride, really. When I quit my old job in 2017, I really didn't know, how that would go down, and if I could actually sustain my life. I had money for roughly a year, and was just hoping that going full time into this whole world of creative coding as a freelancer would just work. I was quite sure just because I loved it, but it was awesome just to see how quickly it took off, and agencies started reaching out. I got a chance to work with some amazing people. Won some crazy awards I hadn't even heard existed before because, again, I'm from a small town. I didn't know that stuff. I got invited to give crazy talks at the Dutch Design Week Republica. So again, I'm not saying that to show you how cool I am or something. Just I'm still like amazed myself by what this potential of creative coding and by definition processing coming into my life actually changed for me. From being a guy, yeah, cool, working with an agency of 40 people to basically working all over the world, from like New York to Australia almost daily. This is something I think which only happens in such fields where still like a lot of innovation and a lot of cool stuff are just possible. And again, I'm just saying that to hopefully inspire everybody of you who's interested in doing something as well, to just dream and dare and do it, and it's going to be cool. So one of the things I really learned from my perspective, and I think I'm already talking a bit longer than I anticipated, but it might be something that Tim and I, and hopefully everybody can talk about, is that I learned that storytelling is still like more important than technology. What I mean by that is not that technology is not important, but that I found, with all of these projects I did, dozens of them, that if you only focus on technology, it's always going to limit your creative scope. So people and humans in story are still at the center of everything which is happening in this field. And it was just something I wanted to throw in here because I see a lot of people more focusing on the technical aspects, and by that also sometimes getting a bit scared of not being good enough. But if you have a good story and if you want to show something new with this, if you just want to explore something cool, don't be afraid. Just do it. Technology is just a tool which enables you to do what you want to do. So I only have one final thing I want to show, because I was talking about working with agencies and stuff, and I want to show you one case as the final thing of this talk, of how I apply like creative coding to agency and branding work. And it's a case called Brute. So I'm going to show you a little video, talk about it, and then maybe we have a couple of minutes for Q&A, and I'll just roll it. So I love to show this case just because I think it shows why creative coding, if used correctly, is such a powerful tool. Now, I credit this with the incredibly forward-thinking people at Lando Associates Hamburg, and they were approached by this vineyard, which was just starting to grow wine in Hamburg, which, if you're familiar or not, is in the very north of Germany, and not something that you usually associate with good wine. It's something where people, say like, yeah, good wine like equals a lot of sun, France, Spain, Australia. I'm not a big wine person, but basically these things come to mind. So that's a huge problem, that they were afraid that nobody was going to take them seriously. That, on trade fairs, they were going to put into the last booth somewhere, nobody's showing up. And so we try to make this sort of weakness into a strength by completely focusing on what actually makes a wine. And that's a question I ask a lot of times, like, what is the essence of your product? What makes it tick? What makes it work? What makes it unique? What makes it happen? And if you think about it, without the weather, there's no wine. It is completely defined by the elements. And by focusing the story completely on that and kind of making it center stage, we kind of flipped it around and got people to be really interested in it and to think about it, to, okay, wow, cool. And, what does that taste like if, the accumulated weather of this, vintage was actually that? And as you can see here on that graphic, we put you can't see it on a graphic, we put a kind of like a weather station at the vineyard. We are still collecting data in real time. And make that visible on the website. But also what we do is we accumulate the complete year that this unique vintage has grown and turn that into this visual representation of what went into that year. And as you can see, if it's like hotter, it turns more red. If there's, a lot of wind, you have these stripes, and you can read it from top to bottom, kind of as a chart, as a map of kind of how that wine evolved over that course of the year. And you also see the accumulated, averaged out data of, in average, that vintage had 13.5 kilometers of wind per hour, etc. Kind of making these into stories in itself, and something where people start to question, what is a wine? What does it taste like? Is the sun, does it taste different if it had more or less sun? And I think that was a cool way to go. What it also was, again, this a web experience where you can check it out in real time. It's all coming from this silhouette of a wine bottle, this three.js on the web itself. So this is not done in processing, but could very well be. And you can experience it. What also this started for me was realizing that these could be tools that can be used in agencies to complete like the entire marketing collateral. So we created everything, the entire video, all of the print materials, all of the graphics, all of the stuff that the social media department generated, all the banners, like basically everything was created out of this generative system and put into place on the various touch points. And it was, for me, a defining factor again, because we're not just saying, let's use particles because it's like complex looking, but we wanted to tell a story. And I think we were quite successful, as still when I show this case, people in the end still usually ask like, okay, what did it really taste like? And again, this is why I love to show this case, because it's not focusing on the technical aspects, but it's using technology to tell a story that may not have been told like this before. All right, and yeah, if you take this input-output pattern, basically what we did, we took the input of weather and the output was branding and marketing collateral. All right, so there's a lot of more stuff, shameless self-advertisement, not really, but if you're interested in this way of thinking, check out my website. I have a lot of cases which use this input-output model really to just hopefully tell interesting stories and create branding from data. So again, it's something where if you're just interested in this approach, you might find some inspiration or some stuff, for your next project. Again, the possibilities are infinite, and it's 2 minutes past what I was supposed to talk. So thanks a lot. Again, if you're interested, check out my website. Also, would love to hear what you think. Hit me up on Instagram or wherever you like. And again, thanks a lot for listening. That's it.
Nice.
How to stop this. All right, cool.
Thank you so much, Patrik.